Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Cooper, and I am the Senior Program Manager and Opioid Subject Matter Expert at the National Safety Council. Many of you may know that the National Safety Council is a chartered by Congress organization that has focused on safety for over 100 years. And over the past decade, we have focused heavily on addressing the opioid crisis both in the communities and in the workplace. One thing that we know is that over 95% of all opioid overdoses happen in working aged adults. Another thing we know is that over 70% of people with substance use disorders are in the workforce. People who struggle with opioid and substance use are our friends, our family members, our neighbors, our colleagues, our employees, and more. We recognize, of course, that it's important to address opioids, via the workplace, because for many of us, the workplace is a place where we spend most of our time. We see our coworkers and our colleagues as much, if not more, than we see our family and our friends. For that reason, it's really important to understand what can we do if we think that a colleague or a coworker or even a supervisor or one of your employees is struggling with opioid use or opioid misuse. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the tips and tricks to how to, of navigating that situation. It's not an easy one, and it certainly is uncomfortable sometimes because we don't want to be wrong and we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, and we do want to help. All of those things are true at the same time. And when people are defensive or concerned or they're afraid of losing their job, they may not react well to conversations. They may think that you are, kind of invading their privacy. And this is kind of a conversation today about how do we kind of navigate that space. So the first thing to really think about is, am I recognizing that something is going on with this person, right? Maybe my colleague is, acting differently, and what does that actually look like? So, sometimes impairment or substance use or a substance use disorder, it can manifest in different ways. Sometimes you think about the really clear cases, right, where somebody is stumbling or not able to walk in a straight line, or maybe they smell like alcohol, or you think that you saw them using some sort of drugs or something like that, and then you're kind of like, okay, well, I have a visual confirmation here that something else is going on. But sometimes it's more subtle. Sometimes we're talking about, kind of concerning or changing behavior patterns, like maybe people are having reactions to things that are a little bit disproportionate, or maybe they're irritable, or you're having conversations with them that they're not remembering. They might be isolating themselves from their colleagues in an unusual way. They might not be concentrating well, that kind of stuff. Now, this is difficult because all of these things can happen for reasons that aren't related to substance use, right? Maybe there's some stuff going on at home and they're just in a bad mood, or maybe they are fatigued because they just haven't been sleeping well, or they've got some other health conditions going on that's making, maybe medications are making them, a little bit forgetful, or maybe, I don't know, it could be really anything, right? Isolating yourself from colleagues, maybe they just need a break, maybe they're just overdone. For a lot of us personally, going back into the world after the pandemic, a lot of us are going to be acting maybe a little bit differently than we were before the pandemic, right? So it's important, of course, not to assume cause, but we all know each other at the same time, right? So you're kind of like, you're not acting right. So what can I do? How can I help? So it's, important always to say, okay, how is my relationship with this person? How do we normally talk? I mean, if I were to go to somebody that I don't know very well and say something kind of pushy, like, I think that you have a problem, we should talk about this, that's not going to fly. So what is the relationship like, right? Is it a pretty formal one? Is it a relationship where, you feel like we could have a pretty deep conversation? And, kind of say, this is how I'd like to approach. It's kind of run through different scenarios in your mind, right? So for me, if I'm going to talk about, say, one of my colleagues, and if I'm on Zoom, right, it's still different than it is in person. But it's like, hey, I'm concerned about a couple things I've been seeing lately. Is there anything I can do to help? And that kind of opens the door, right, to talk about, it could be anything. Like I said, it could be problems at home. You could have a new baby that's not sleeping through the night, right? You could have any number of things going on. And I mean, we've all faced, completely unprecedented stressors over the past year plus, right? So it could just be kind of a chronic fatigue and just not feeling great, kind of feeling blah. Opening that door, though, does two things. One, in that moment, it enables them to share with you what they're willing to share. But as importantly, it also enables them to say, hey, this is a person that if and when I'm ready, I can come to this person and they might be able to help me out. So you're doing so many things just by saying, hey, I'm noticing that things are a little different. Are you all right? This is a point where, it's a really good opportunity to really talk about stigma, right? Because stigma is one of the biggest barriers to accessing help when it's needed. And you'll hear from Matthew Stefanko of the National Stigma Initiative at Shatterproof later on about more specific ways to address stigma in the workplace. That said, just saying, hey, I am here to help if you need it. I can have this conversation if you want. And then also on your side, preparing, right? So what if they do say, yeah, I'm actually struggling with some substance use stuff. And it's probably not going to be phrased like that, right? But maybe it is. Oftentimes people kind of beat around the bush a little bit. Or maybe they'll say, my brother is, or my spouse is, or we don't know what to do. So this is a point where, for you as a person who's kind of having the conversation, it's good to have some kind of background knowledge, right? Y'all exist in the same community, right? So what are some good community resources? Is there a community center or a recovery group, or is there a 211 number that they can call to get linked to resources? Knowing that, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, has a 24-hour behavioral health services hotline is something that you can absolutely leverage. So kind of having that mental list or even a physical list, you want to write it down, write it down. It's never bad to have that information, at the tip of your tongue or in your pocket. If somebody's like, actually, I do need help. What does that conversation look like? So as far as that goes, that's a really concrete action step that you can take to be ready to have the conversation. And this is also good because sometimes it's not going to be because you prompted it, right? Sometimes it could be because something else happened. Somebody might have lost their job due to something like this and they're not sure how to get help. Alternatively, it's also important to know your workplace resources. This is your colleague, right? If it is your colleague, then, is there an employee assistance program? What is the number? Do you understand how to access those services? These are the points where when somebody is struggling, it can be really difficult to navigate complicated systems. And our healthcare system is complicated. Getting treatment is complicated. It feels complicated, even when you're doing just fine, let alone when you're trying to make long lasting change and come out the other side of something that is a really difficult thing to do. Opioid use is a difficult thing to overcome for many, many people. So being that person that can make that connection, being that person that can take it to the next level, being that person who can just be there and say, hey, I can sit with you in the room while you make this first call, or I can help you write the email, or I can help you do whatever it is. Those are the kinds of things that may feel like they're small action steps that can actually completely change somebody's life. So as we're all thinking about, what can I do? Am I scared to have the conversation? What if they think that I am, pushing them? What if they think that, I'm invading their privacy? Those things may still happen. But it's important to remember that as much as we listen to other people's boundaries, still doing these steps of asking the questions and putting yourself out there as a person who cares, and understanding what it is that needs to be done so that you can help somebody do it. These are things that, like I said, they can change somebody's life. And if you are comfortable and you are a person who has experienced this personally, either with yourself or with a loved one, if you have somebody that's gone through the addiction life cycle and you're comfortable sharing that, then that person who you're concerned about is going to know that you do get it at least a little bit. And removing the judgment from that conversation, we're making sure that we're not using stigmatizing language, but just saying, hey, my partner's dealt with this, or my sister, or one of my best friends has struggled with addiction. I can try to help if you want some help. Things like that aren't, this big prescriptive, like tough love, you got to do better, got to be better, big, that might not always work, right? So it's just kind of a constant state of being present and letting people know that, hey, I can be here to help if you need it. I've dealt with this before, or I have the resources, just call me anytime and let me know. And checking in and doing that can really make the difference in somebody's life and really go a long way to addressing some of the fears and those deeply held stigmatizing beliefs that some of us have about addiction and substance use and what it actually means. So best of luck. This is something that we all have to deal with at some point. We are concerned about people and don't know how to address it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this today. I hope it was helpful. And if we can ever be of any help, check us out at nsc.org or impairment at nsc.org, and we'll see what we can do to get you linked up with the stuff that you need. Thank you.